We set out to do this 2020 Equity Partner Contribution Compensation Survey in December, and we didn't really know what was about to unfold. By the time the survey finished, we still didn't quite know what was about to unfold, but certainly by the time Michael Roche and I, my co-author, started to put the results together, things had well and truly unfolded and or unravelled in some cases. And so the lenses that we applied to the results were twofold. Firstly, as we would have ordinarily, to look at this in the context of the evolving professions and the sorts of changes that we've been seeing over the last 10 or 15 years around competition, around labour supplies, around technology and procurement, etc. So all of those things that we are pretty well familiar with now. Overlaid with that, of course, is what's right in front of us. And what emerged for us were two things. Firstly, the importance of cohesion amongst partnerships at this point. We know that there are some very difficult decisions being made in relation to compensation and headcount and all of these sorts of things. I think what we learnt from the global financial crisis was the importance of maintaining cohesion. And without going into depth on this, I certainly think that firms have benefited from that being in the recent memory. Secondly, though, picking up on what Francesca said, a lot of what we're asking partners to do right now is really be very entrepreneurial, not necessarily in the business development sense, but in the team building sense and the client outreach sense, to be looking for how they can be of use and value to their clients in this time. And that is an entrepreneurial skill set that will be important. So they're the two lenses that we looked at the results through. Before I go into the 5 key findings, let me just step back and tell you a little bit about the survey. We had 160 respondents, which for a survey of this nature is pretty good. And I want to thank our collaboration partners for helping us with the distribution, including Richard, you and Managing Partners Forum, as well as NatWest and Edge International and Chile IQ Marketing. In terms of those 160 people, respondents, 50% were comprised of managing partners and CEOs, and the next most prominent groups were CFOs, COOs, and HRDs. We had strong representation from the UK, continental Europe, and Australia. Predominant responses from law firms, followed by accounting firms. And in terms of the size of firms, almost 90% of firms had 75 or fewer partners. That is within the local partnership. So still some members of larger federations within that group as well. In terms of the 5 key insights, and I will move through these very quickly, but at the end I will tell you where you can go to find out more information about this. Firstly, the first striking insight is that when it comes to measures of performance, 3/4 of the measures that we're using to identify reward outcomes relate to production. Just let that sink in for a moment. 75%. Now that's bigger than we'd expected. We knew it would be large, but that's a very significant number. Second most popular were business development measures, then some leadership measures. Really nowhere on the radar was collaboration or innovation. And just let that sink in for a moment, because so much of our effort as organisations is focused around getting people to behave in a more collaborative and innovative way, and yet the reward measures that we're using are simply not following. I'll stop there and move on to the next one. The second insight is that firms on the whole are good at recognising good performance, but are struggling with dealing with poor performance. So 88% of respondents said that they were happy with the way that the firm acknowledges good performance. Only 59% were confident that firms were dealing with poor performance through clear improvement plans. Again, there's a whole dialogue around why we struggle with poor performance, and now's not the time or place. But the important thing I want to note there is that this figure in 2020 hasn't shifted from our 2017 research. This third insight that I want to share is that the top to bottom spread, that is to say the multiple pay between the lowest paid equity partner and the highest paid equity partner in the firm, the most popular spread is now between 3 to 1 and 5 to 1. And that's significant because in 2017, when we ran this survey, the spread was between, the most popular spread was between 2 to 1 and 3 to 1. So there's clearly an effort to reward high performers. What we would say briefly in relation to our current context is we've got to be very careful that when we stretch that spread, we don't hurt cohesion. And so it's not good enough just to stretch it. There actually has to be other reforms going on in the firm to justify that kind of change whilst maintaining cohesion. The fourth insight is that partner compensation systems are effective at providing fair outcomes, with 74% of respondents saying that was the case, but only 52% said that the process was efficient. And those of you who are involved in it will feel that pain. You'll know why that number is pretty low. And again, it's consistently low across multiple years. And there are things that can be done. A lot of that does involve the use of technology, but I won't go into depth there. And the fifth and final insight from the survey that I want to share today is that partner compensation systems tend to undervalue leadership and management roles. And for many of you on the call in leadership and management roles, you won't be surprised. But the telling factor here is that only 31% of respondent firms are explicitly acknowledging and dealing with leadership and management roles in their contribution and reward processes. Again, there's a lot that can be done there, but now's not really the time to go into that. My colleague, my co-author, Michael Roche, is presenting Richard at a session next week, and it will probably have a chance to go into a little bit more depth. But if you are interested in finding out a bit more, there's on the Performance Leader website, that's our website, performanceleader.com, there is a 1-hour webinar that you can view on this, a half-hour podcast you can listen to, and you can download the report as well. So I should